a centuries-old beer style born during the British colony of India, revamped and brought back to life in the 1980s. IPA, or India Pale Ale, quickly became one of the world's most popular craft beer styles. One of the main epicenters of this revival was California, where the West Coast IPA style was created. This beer style is characterized by a notable citrus and tropical fruit aroma and a satisfying piney bitterness on top of a just strong enough light malt structure. The result? An exceptionally drinkable beer, perfect for any occasion. Basqueland's flagship and #1 selling beer is called Imparable, a true-to-style West Coast IPA clocking in at 6.8% alcohol and 62 IBUs that sip after sip keeps you coming back for more. Let's get brewing and let us show you how it's made. We source Imparable's extra pale malt from Simpson's Malt, a family-run business based in northern England, producing the finest brewing malts since 1862. During the malting process, barley is allowed to germinate, then quickly dried. Barley grains have tough husks locking all the good stuff inside. Because of this, the malt is passed through a special mill. The goal is to simply break the grain, not pulverize it. This increases the surface area of the grain and allows the starches to be utilized in the next step, the mash. In this next stage, milled grain is transported upwards to mix with hot water in a vessel called the mash tun. Large agitators stir the mix and then let it steep. During the mash, the malt starches and proteins are converted to fermentable sugars that the yeast will be able to use. After the mix has been steeped long enough and reaches the desired sugar concentration, it is transferred to the brew kettle. To capture as much of the remaining sugars as possible, the remaining malt gets washed several times with fresh hot water in a process called sparging. Once that is done, the spent malt is poured out into large plastic containers and given to farmers to be used as animal feed. We've been told the piggies at the farm are quite fond of our spent malt, and if the piggies are happy, so are we. After all the liquid, now called the wort, gets transferred to the brew kettle, the boil begins. Boiling serves several important functions, including sterilizing the wort, increasing concentration, and providing bitterness. For Imparable, there are 3 separate hop additions during the boil. In the final stage of the boil, a whirlpool is created inside the brew kettle. This forces hop particles and underside proteins to gather in the center of the kettle, leaving the rest of the wort clear and ready to be transferred to fermentation. As the saying goes, cleanliness is godliness, and cleanliness is of utmost importance throughout brewing. Every piece of equipment, from kettle to hose, from fermenter to canning lines, are cleaned in place by running a cleaning solution at elevated temperatures throughout the equipment. Imagine your home dishwasher, but on steroids. Next up is fermentation. Fermentation has been practiced for thousands of years by practically all civilizations throughout history as a way to preserve foods, and most importantly, to produce alcoholic beverages. Besides making water safe to drink, it also made it fun to drink. After the whirlpool, the wort is quickly cooled to 20 degrees Celsius and transferred to a large fermenter tank. California ale yeast is pitched in, and then the magic happens. Billions of fresh yeast cells go to work, eating the sugars extracted from the malt and producing alcohol and CO2 as byproducts. At the end of the primary fermentation, the temperature is lowered again. Yeast will cluster or flocculate and fall to the bottom of the cone. This yeast can be harvested and repitched in several future batches. Primary fermentation typically lasts 4 to 7 days. After this, the liquid is officially called beer and goes on to Beverage University to undergo dry hopping and maturation. Dry hopping is a cold infusion that intensifies fresh hop aromas and flavors. In this stage, the brewer will open a small port on top of the fermenter and add copious amounts of fresh Citra, Mosaic, and Simcoe hops. 3 days after dry hopping, the temperature is dropped to 0 degrees Celsius and kept there for a week of maturation. Maturation is essential to finish off and make the green beer palatable. After about 21 days, fermentation and maturation are complete. It is time for the centrifuge. This process removes all the yeast and hop particulates from the beer without stripping flavor or aroma. It also helps stabilize the beer and give it a longer shelf life, while allowing the brewer to control the texture and clarity of the beer. The centrifuge beer is then passed to a bright beer tank, or BBT, to condition and await carbonation. During carbonation, here at Basqueland we use a microscopically perforated pipe, called a carb stone, through which CO2 is introduced under pressure until the gas penetrates and is absorbed by the beer. Now the beer is ready for packaging. There are so many variables that affect the final taste, aroma, and overall quality of the beer, even at the moment of packaging. The main objective is to keep dissolved oxygen to a minimum to avoid oxidation while also achieving the best yield possible. During kegging, 30-liter key kegs are filled upside down. Special attention is given to avoid contamination by spraying a sanitizing solution on the filling port before and after filling. In the canning and bottling lines, empty containers are first rinsed with water. Next, CO2 is pumped into the container to displace any oxygen that could otherwise spoil or oxidate the beer. After that, filling spouts pour the beer into the rinsed and purged containers. The beer is kept very cold to avoid overfoaming, although a little foam is needed to create a buffer. Finally, a lid or cap is dropped into position, and the container goes through a series of dies that fold the edges in, ensuring a tight seal. A quick rinse, and the sealed cans and bottles wave packaging goodbye and get on the home stretch. Labeling. Bottles are labeled before entering the filling line, while cans get their green Imparable badges after. As the container enters the labeling line, a sensor detects their position and a roller is quickly pressed onto them to spin them and evenly peel the label off the label roll. The result is a perfectly positioned and even Imparable label. Filled and labeled bottles are automatically boxed by our very own Wall-E. On the other hand, cans are lovingly boxed and sealed by hand. Immediately following packaging, Imparable will await distribution in our refrigerator. This ensures longer shelf life and that it's at its freshest when it's time to be consumed at home or at your favorite bar. Now onto the best part of the whole process, drinking a cold Imparable. We hope you enjoyed this video and tune in next time for more Basqueland content. Imparable means unstoppable. See for yourself.